2006, President George W. Bush asked his advisors if an attack on Iran was feasible. The answer was no. There are now indications that Middle East experts have changed their minds. Even Saudi Arabia has become an advocate of removing Iran's nuclear capability by force. Are we headed for war? Yes, we are. We'll explain today on Politics and Religion.
Look, there are two things I don't discuss: politics and religion.
In my house, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion.
I'll talk to you about anything except politics and religion.
I never talk about politics and religion.
Politics determines how we'll live here on earth. Religion determines how we'll live forever. I'm Irvin Baxter. I think it's time we talk about it.
You know, there are some things in Bible prophecy that we can be absolutely sure of. There are other things that we sort of put together the scenario by circumstantial evidence. However, today we want to talk for a little while about something that we are absolutely sure about. The reason I want to talk to you about this today is because there's an article appearing, an attack on Iran, back on the table. Well, as it has come out back in 2006, some of President Bush's advisors were called in and were questioned as to the feasibility of an attack to remove Iran's nuclear capacity. They replied to President George W. Bush that yes, we could attack. However, the likelihood of removing all of Iran's nuclear ability was very low, and consequently they did not feel like an attack was feasible. Furthermore, the possibility of creating a regional war and maybe even a world war was extremely high. So from that time until this, every single other possibility has been considered, but they've sort of placed that on the back burner because obviously the price tags seem to be very, very high. However, there have been developments that may be changing that because Iran is closer now than ever to having the ability to produce nuclear weaponry. Head of the CIA, Mr. Panetta, said recently that Iran has enough nuclear material for 2 nuclear bombs right now. Nothing has worked. Sanctions have not worked. And even though heightened sanctions have been passed against Iran within the last couple of months, there is no confidence that those are going to work either, because even though the sanctions were heightened, yet China and Russia made sure that they were not heightened so much that they were really going to work. Because really they're on Iran's side, the United States is on Israel's side. So this has produced a situation that appears to be, at least, unsolvable. So apparently now, some of the advisors surrounding President Obama are changing their minds. They are reconsidering the feasibility of an attack on the nation of Iran. And some of them that thought it would not work 4 years ago are now thinking that it will work now. Why? Because apparently, over the last several years, there has been a concerted effort to establish eyes on the ground, spies. There have been those that have reported to us the location of the different nuclear facilities of Iran. Until today, apparently there's a fairly comfortable opinion that we, in fact, could cripple for the foreseeable future the nuclear capability of Iraq. Now, once you hear those words, I should have said of Iran, once you hear those words, what does that do to us then? Let's back up now and go to an unimpeachable source, the Bible. Does the Bible say anything about this whatsoever? It does. Has quite a bit to say about it actually. But one ominous prophecy that we have that cannot be denied. Now, let me pause just a moment to make sure you understand. You may be a new listener to Politics and Religion. But I'll never forget back in 1968 when God first opened my understanding to the fact that the Berlin Wall was going to be torn down, the two Germanys would be reunited, and that would throw us into the New World Order, which ultimately would become the one world government of the Antichrist. I began to teach that back in 1968, and there were a lot of eyebrows raised, but I was a relatively unknown person at the time, and so there wasn't a lot of harm done. But over time, I ended up putting in my first book, A Message for the President, which was published in 1986. I put in my first book that the Berlin Wall was coming down, the two Germanys would be reunited. Well, it hadn't happened yet. Now, that's when you really get out there on a limb, when you say something is going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. What if it doesn't happen? What do? Pull the book out of circulation and hope that no one remembers? It's not the best choice. Well, anyway, November the 9th, 1989, the wall came down. Now, a year before that, President Ronald Reagan had stood beside the wall and said, if you want peace like you say you do, Mr. Gorbachev, and if you believe in freedom like you say you do, tear down this wall. All of us have heard it over and over and over again. Well, I had already written my book by then, and by then that was real music to my ears. Now then, the President of the United States is advocating exactly what I saw 21 years before when it looked like there was no chance of that wall coming down. Well, you know the rest of the story. November the 9th of 1989, the wall did come down. Within 1 year, the two Germanys were reunited. The Iron Curtain was rolled up. And the New World Order was declared within 20 days of the fall of the Berlin Wall by none other than George Bush Sr. So everything came to pass. And that was a prophecy I saw, and I felt sure about it. I was totally convinced. And that's the reason I said this is going to happen. Now, there are some prophecies that maybe you see sort of through a glass darkly, but then there's this prophecy of a war, the worst war the world has ever seen. A war that will wipe out 1/3 of the entire human race. I'll never forget the day